Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless Official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The storm inside the Abbott mansion had been brewing for weeks, but no one, not even Kyle Abbott, who'd survived more heartbreak than most, was prepared for the moment when little Harrison marched into his father's office with a trembling lower lip and a tablet clutched tightly in his small hands. It started innocently, almost heartbreakingly so, with Harrison calling softly, "Daddy. I need to show you something." Kyle barely looked up at first, buried in reports from Jabot and still trying to balance the chaos Claire and Holden had stirred into his life with their constant web of half-truths, apologies, and tense smiles. But the moment he saw the fear in Harrison's eyes, the kind of fear no child should ever carry, Kyle's entire world snapped into focus. He put down everything, bent to his son's level, and asked what was wrong. Harrison hesitated, swallowed hard, and whispered, "It's about Claire and Holden. I heard them talking. And I found this." What followed was the sound of Kyle's heart cracking open as Harrison shakily handed him the tablet. On the screen was a folder labeled Project Orchard, something Kyle had never seen before but immediately knew spelled doom. Harrison explained in scattered, frightened sentences that he'd used the tablet Claire sometimes let him play on, that he'd tapped the wrong thing, that he'd heard Claire arguing with Holden about keeping Kyle in the dark, and that she'd said something about making sure Harrison doesn't remember anything. Kyle's hands trembled as he opened the file, and what he saw inside made his blood run cold: audio clips, text logs, and documents that exposed a months-long plan Claire and Holden had been constructing behind his back. Not a misunderstanding. Not a slip. A plan. Documents where Claire had outlined ways to manipulate Kyle's emotions to regain his trust. Messages between Claire and Holden detailing secret meetings at hotels under false names. Audio recordings of Claire admitting she had no choice but to play the victim until the Abbott money pipeline is secure. Even worse, one recording captured Holden cautioning her that Harrison getting attached is useful leverage, but don't let him get too close. Kyle's breath left him. The room spun. He felt physically sick. Every second of the last few months, the fragile rebuilding, Claire's apologies, the tears she'd shed, the way she'd hugged Harrison, the promise that she was a changed woman, came crashing down like shattered glass around him. He stared, horrified, as Harrison's voice cracked, "Daddy, did Claire lie to us?" And that was the moment the dam inside Kyle burst. He pulled Harrison into his arms, pressed his forehead to his son's hair, and shook as silent tears streamed down his face. He didn't want his child to see him like this, broken and betrayed, but he couldn't stop it. Kyle had trusted Claire. Against advice, against warnings, against his mother's intuition and Summer's quiet heartbreak. And now the evidence was undeniable. Harrison had been the one to uncover the truth, the one who'd found the smoking gun, the one who'd forced Kyle to confront what he'd been too blinded to see. "You did the right thing," Kyle whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking as he hugged Harrison tighter. The more Kyle scrolled through the files, the worse it got. Every dark corner of Claire's past that she'd claimed she'd healed from was still alive, active, calculated, and aimed directly at Kyle and his son. Notes where she and Holden discussed keeping Harrison emotionally dependent so Kyle would never cut her out. Plans to undermine Summer subtly by planting seeds of doubt in Kyle's mind about her ability to co-parent. Conversations about convincing Kyle to let Claire move in permanently so she could monitor Harrison's behavior and adjust the narrative accordingly. It wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty. It was manipulation. And it was premeditated. Kyle slammed the tablet shut as a guttural sob tore out of him. Years of heartbreak had carved deep scars, but this was a knife twisted straight into the center of everything he held sacred. Why would she do this? Kyle gasped. Harrison wiped his eyes and said in the smallest voice, "Because she doesn't love us, Daddy. She just pretends." Those words destroyed him more than the files ever could. Kyle cupped his son's face and promised, with every ounce of strength he had left, "You will always be safe. I swear it." Harrison buried himself in Kyle's chest and finally let himself cry too. When Kyle finally composed himself enough to stand, everything inside him hardened. This wasn't just betrayal, it was war. He gently set Harrison up with a movie and called Jack, Summer, and even Victor, because he knew he would need an army to take down Claire and Holden after what they'd done. He replayed the recordings again, one by one, each confirmation of Claire's deception stabbing him deeper. Claire confessing she never loved him. Holden urging her to finish what they started. Claire worrying that Harrison was getting too attached and that sentimentality will ruin everything. Kyle's tears dried into something darker, something fierce and unyielding. They had used his child. They had pretended affection to gain access to his life, his emotions, and his legacy. And Harrison, sweet, innocent Harrison, had been the one to bring their lies crashing into the light. That reality both shattered Kyle and fueled him. When he heard the front door open minutes later and Claire's voice call, "Kyle?" "Harrison," he felt his entire body lock up. Harrison tensed beside him. Kyle looked at his son, not with panic, but with fire, and whispered, "Stay behind me." Claire stepped into the room, smiling as though she hadn't just been exposed. As though her world wasn't about to explode. As though she still had any power left. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sincerity. Kyle didn't say a word at first. He simply set the tablet on the coffee table and pressed play. Claire froze as her own voice filled the room, scheming, cold, unmistakably damning. Holden's voice followed, sealing her fate. Claire went white. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. The mask slipped. Her eyes turned sharp. Calculating. Caught. Harrison grabbed Kyle's hand tightly. "I trusted you," Kyle finally said, voice raw and shaking. "I believed you. I defended you. I let you near my son." Claire tried to stammer out an explanation, but Kyle cut her off with a raised hand that trembled with both fury and heartbreak. "Don't. Not one more lie." Harrison stepped forward, surprising both adults as he said, "You hurt my daddy." And those simple words, spoken with childlike clarity, were the killing blow. Claire's face crumbled. Holden appeared in the doorway seconds later, obviously summoned, and froze when he saw the tablet still playing their private recordings. Kyle erupted, unleashing weeks of swallowed pain, betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak in one volcanic burst. By the time he was done, Claire was trembling, Holden was pale, and Harrison was clutching Kyle protectively as though he were the parent shielding Kyle from harm. And suddenly, Kyle saw everything clearly, every moment he'd doubted himself, every time he'd ignored a red flag, every warning he'd brushed aside. Claire and Holden had been playing him. But Harrison's bravery, Harrison's honesty, had saved them both. Kyle lifted his son, holding him as tightly as he could, whispering, "Thank you. You saved us." And as Claire stood defeated, her lies exposed, and Holden seethed in silent rage, Kyle walked away with Harrison in his arms. The Abbott home had witnessed countless heartbreaks over generations, but nothing as devastating, nothing as defining, and nothing as transformative as the moment a child told the truth, handed his father one shocking file, and destroyed the carefully constructed facade Claire and Holden had spent months building. Harrison had spoken. The evidence was undeniable. And Kyle Abbott's world would never be the same again. But the fallout from Harrison's revelation was only beginning. The silence that followed Kyle's exit hit Claire like a physical force. She felt it squeezing her chest, choking her breath, making her fingers twitch with desperate panic. For months she had kept her lies straight, her expressions polished, her stories consistent, but now, with the walls finally torn down, she had nothing left to hide behind. Holden reached for her arm, but she jerked away, her eyes wild. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she hissed. But Holden simply stared at her with a cold, annoyed exhale, as though she were a failing pawn in a game he had assumed he could always control. "You got sloppy," he muttered. "You let the kid wander around with your tablet. What did you expect?" Claire felt something in her break, something deep, something painful, something human, because even though she had made her share of mistakes, even though she had agreed to schemes and manipulations, she had developed a genuine affection for Harrison. It had been the one part of the plan she hadn't anticipated. She had tried to push the feeling away, pretend it was something she imagined, but the affection was real. Harrison's smile, his gentleness, his innocence, he had softened her, frightened her, made her question everything. And now the very child she had accidentally learned to care for had been the one to expose her. She slid down the wall, burying her face in her shaking hands, while Holden stood there, stone-like, annoyed rather than devastated. "Pull yourself together," he said sharply. "We're not done yet." Claire lifted her head, her tear-streaked face twisted in disbelief. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Kyle hates me. Harrison hates me. I lost everything." Holden's jaw tightened. "Then get it back." She blinked hard. "I can't." "You can," he snapped. "Because if you don't, we lose everything, not just the Abbott money, not just the influence, but every advantage we've been building." Claire stared at him, horrified. "Don't you see? They heard everything. The recordings, Holden's lip curled. "Recordings can be spun. Cry. Apologize. Blame trauma. Blame me. Tell Kyle I manipulated you, he'll believe you, because he wants to believe you." Claire's stomach twisted. She knew Kyle's heart, how loyal, how gentle, how eager he was to see good in people. She had used that kindness, exploited it, twisted it into a tool. Now the thought of using it again made bile rise in her throat. "Not this time," she whispered. "He saw the truth. He heard me." Holden crossed the room in 2 long strides and grabbed her chin harshly, forcing her to look at him. "You don't get to feel bad now," he growled. "We're too close." Claire flinched. For months she had followed his lead, letting him guide her through lies, letting him convince her that she needed him to stay protected, needed him to survive. But now, seeing the monster behind his eyes, she realized she'd never understood the full picture. Holden didn't care about her. He never did. She was a tool. A piece on the board. And Harrison, the sweet boy she had grown to care for, had been nothing but a strategy to him. She shoved Holden away with a burst of strength she didn't know she had. "I'm done," she spat. "You can twist everything in your head all you want, but I'm not going near Kyle or Harrison again." Holden laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "Oh, but you are. If you think you're walking away now, you're delusional. We need the Abbott access. We need Kyle. And you're the key." Claire wiped her cheeks. "I won't be your puppet anymore." Holden's expression hardened, but before he could respond, the door slammed, and Jack Abbott stormed into the room like a force of nature. His eyes burned with fury, the kind that could only come from a parent whose child, and grandchild, had been hurt. "Get out," Jack growled at Holden. Holden narrowed his eyes. "I don't answer to you." Jack took 1 step forward, a step that carried 4 decades of power, authority, and reputation, and Holden instantly backed up. "I said," Jack repeated, voice like steel, "get out of my house before I drag you out myself." Holden's mouth twisted into a sneer, but he knew better than to push Jack Abbott. He stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Jack turned to Claire with a look she would never forget. Disappointment. Disgust. But more than anything, heartbreak. "How could you?" Jack whispered, sounding genuinely wounded. "After everything Kyle has been through, after everything Harrison has survived, how could you do this to them?" Claire's chest tightened. For the first time, she didn't have a lie ready. Her voice cracked. I never meant to hurt Harrison." Jack's jaw tightened. "But you did. And that's unforgivable." Claire stood up shakily. "I'll leave. I won't make excuses." "Good," Jack said coldly. "Because there are none." Claire moved toward the door, but Jack wasn't finished. "You won't contact Kyle," he warned. "You won't contact Harrison. You won't contact anyone in this family. If you try, I will end whatever you and Holden were planning in ways you can't even imagine. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I understand. Jack stared at her for a long moment. I thought maybe there was good in you, he said quietly. Kyle thought so too. And Harrison, his voice broke for just a second, barely noticeable, but Claire caught it. That hurt more than anything. She left without another word. Meanwhile, upstairs, Summer had rushed to the mansion the moment Jack told her what happened, arriving breathless to find Kyle pacing the hallway outside Harrison's room like a caged animal. His eyes were red, his breathing uneven, his hands shaking uncontrollably. She had never seen him like this, not even during their divorce, not even during the worst fights. Kyle, she whispered, touching his arm. He almost collapsed into her. Summer wrapped her arms around him as he buried his face against her shoulder, letting out a broken sob he'd been trying to hold in. She used him, Summer, Kyle choked out. She used our son. Summer's heart shattered as she held him tighter. Harrison is safe now, she murmured. You protected him. Kyle shook his head. No. Harrison protected me. Summer paused. What do you mean? Kyle pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes. He found everything. He showed me. If he hadn't, he swallowed hard. I don't even want to think about how far this could have gone. Summer felt anger swell inside her, white-hot, burning, protective. We won't let her anywhere near him again, she vowed. I promise you that. But Kyle wasn't hearing solutions, not yet. He was stuck in the ache, the betrayal, the horrifying truth that the woman he had been letting into his life, his home, his son's world, had been plotting against him in the shadows. Summer kissed his forehead softly. A gesture full of history. A gesture full of soul. Look at me, she whispered. Kyle lifted his eyes. You didn't deserve this, she said. Harrison didn't deserve this. His voice cracked again. He was scared, Summer. He was scared, and he didn't want to tell me because he didn't want to upset me. Tears slid down her cheeks. He's brave, she whispered. He's smart. And he loves you more than anything. Kyle nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I just want to keep him safe. And you will, Summer promised. We will. That we hit Kyle deep. But he didn't question it. He didn't overthink it. He leaned into her, letting her hold him the way only she could, gently, fiercely, completely. Down the hall, Harrison peeked out of his room, rubbing his eyes. Daddy? Kyle immediately rushed to him. Hey, buddy, he murmured, kneeling. Harrison crawled into his arms, clinging to him tightly. Did you send Claire away? Harrison asked. Kyle hesitated. Yes, he finally said. She can't be here anymore. Harrison nodded against his shoulder. Good. Kyle closed his eyes, hugging his son tighter. Summer placed a hand on both of them, a silent promise of unity. A family, broken, bruised, but still standing. But while the Abbotts tried to regain their footing, Holden was spiraling. He stormed into his car, slamming the door and gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Everything, had been ruined by a child. A child he had dismissed. A child he had underestimated. Harrison Abbott had unknowingly blown up months of strategy, lying, plotting, manipulating, and pushing pieces around the board. Holden pulled out his phone, dialing someone quickly. We have a problem, he snapped. The voice on the other end responded with calm irritation. You said it was handled. It was, Holden barked. Until Claire slipped and let the brat see the files. Then fix it, the voice said. You're not backing out now. Holden closed his eyes, forcing back a growl. I'll handle it, he said finally, hanging up. But as he started the car, a chilling truth crept into his mind. Kyle had power. Jack had power. Victor Newman, who would inevitably get involved, had power. And Holden was suddenly very, very exposed. He needed Claire. He needed leverage. He needed control. And he needed it fast. Back at the Abbott mansion, Cal tucked Harrison into bed, brushing the boy's hair from his forehead. "Daddy?" Harrison whispered. "Yeah? Are you crying again?" Kyle paused. Harrison's little hand reached up and touched his cheek. Kyle smiled sadly. "I'm okay," he whispered. "I'm just really proud of you." Harrison's eyes shimmered. "Did I do good?" Kyle hugged him tightly. "You saved us," he said. "You were